So the Las Vegas Raiders have had their first open practice since the very last preseason game they had on Saturday against the San Francisco 49ers, and we are getting some updates that is coming out of the Las Vegas Raiders camp. Some players are starting to take more first team snaps. Other players are kind of locking in, and we also have some guys that are coming back from injury. With, I think, arguably the most important player for the Raiders, right guard Alex Cappa is officially back today at practice for the Raiders. And he worked exclusively with the second team unit. This guy's officially back, and I think for the Raiders, you definitely want to see what this guy can kind of show, right? You pay him $11 million over the next 2 seasons. To me, what Alex Cappa brings to the Las Vegas Raiders is a guy who's a veteran who could potentially start at right guard, which could kick Jackson Powers-Johnson back to the center position. And we talked about Jordan Meredith in yesterday's video. And there were some really, really good moments from Jordan Meredith, but there were also some bad moments. He also had some missed blocks against the San Francisco 49ers. And again, I broke this down in yesterday's video. We did a film breakdown where we watched every single one of the starting offensive line snaps, essentially. And Meredith had a couple of missed blocks. With Alex Cappa back, this means the Raiders can actually start to evaluate what this guy could potentially be. And more than that, he may actually play against the Arizona Cardinals. I could see Alex Cappa starting at right guard and playing essentially the first half for the Raiders, and we'll get a feel for the type of football player he is. I don't really expect the Raiders to put their starters in at all, but I could see Alex Cappa taking snaps at right guard. And I think for the Raiders, you have to find out what Alex Cappa is before you make that decision, because there was a time when Jordan Meredith was a second team center, right? He wasn't the starting guy for the Raiders. There was a time when the Raiders said, hey, we want Jackson Powers-Johnson to be the starting guy. In fact, coming into camp, he was technically the starting center. There wasn't really a battle. But when the Raiders recognized that, hey, maybe we'd be better off moving Powers-Johnson to right guard, maybe Cappa isn't as good as what we kind of think, that's when Jordan Meredith started really taking those first team snaps. And we need to find out what we have with Cappa. And obviously, for Meredith to start taking first team snaps when he wasn't, and then JPJ kicked out to right guard, when Alex Cappa kind of had that position locked in, that does kind of show that the Raiders may not be super high on Alex Cappa, which could also be one of the reasons why Lincoln Kennedy, a former All-Pro offensive tackle for the Raiders, actually believes there's a chance that Alex Cappa does not make this roster. Lincoln Kennedy, one of the all-time greats, especially for the Raiders, actually put it out there where he said, I don't think Alex Cappa makes the final roster. I think they find a way to get out of it, speaking about his contract. So I just want to throw that tidbit out there. He continued on saying, I'm not waiting for him anymore. I'm not waiting for him to show up. Also, it's no slight against him. If you're hurt, you can't do it. I certainly respect that. But we're in a performance-based evaluation, and we do that. There's a game that has to go on. The show must go on. We need people. We don't need bodies to stand on the sideline holding clipboards. Lincoln Kennedy is basically putting it out there that because of the fact that Alex Cappa hasn't really practiced, there's a chance that the Raiders move off of him and end up just going a completely different direction. Now, I personally disagree 100% with Lincoln Kennedy. There's a couple of reasons you don't really want to move off of Alex Cappa. First and foremost, if you move off of Alex Cappa, and let's say your 2 starters is Jordan Meredith and Jackson Powers-Johnson, who's your, and then of course on the other side you have Dylan Parham. Who's your backup guard at that point? You have rookie Caleb Rogers, who has looked good, but then who's next? Who's that next man up after Caleb Rogers? And we also have to kind of keep in mind, Jordan Meredith is a center at this point. Jackson Powers-Johnson might be playing guard, but who's that next guard up? Are you going to rely on Jared Hufford, the rookie guard? The Raiders don't really have options now. Of course, you can just say, hey, let's just keep Putnam. Putnam can play center and guard. You can say let's keep Meredith, who can play center and guard, and Jackson Powers-Johnson can play center and guard. But usually you want to have at least 4 guards going into a game and at least 2 centers. And you could have 3 guys that can play all 3 positions and then just roll with 2 more guys. But, injuries do happen. You don't want to get to a point where, if JPJ and Jordan Meredith go down, do you really want to rely on Will Putnam, who, we don't really know if he's going to make the roster this season? I think Alex Cappa at this point, you have paid him for at least 1 season. You've guaranteed him, I believe, $6 million on his contract, which means for this year, you've guaranteed him his money. A very worst case scenario, he's the best backup offensive lineman you'll have. So I think for the Raiders, you want to keep Alex Cappa at this point. Unless he's just really, really awful and he's not a good football player, I understand in that instance you can move off of him. But we'll see what ends up happening, right? So Alex Cappa is back. Some people don't think he'll make the roster. I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't make the roster, but, based off the contract situation, I think it'd be smart to keep Alex Cappa. You never want to get into a spot where, you do have 2 injuries and now you're going to go and spend even more money on a potential veteran guard, right? You might say, hey, let's spend $2-3 million on another guy when you already had Alex Cappa kind of under contract, right? So we'll see what actually ends up happening as we kind of go forward. I do think Alex Cappa will not start for the Raiders. I think at this point, Jordan Meredith, Jackson Powers-Johnson are going to be your 2 starters at center and right guard. And even Pete Carroll talked a little bit about this yesterday, right? He was talking about, hey, what we've seen from Jordan Meredith is just a lot of growth. And he even kind of slipped it in there saying that I like Jordan Meredith at that position, right? I think we'll roll forward with that. It was something to that tune. It wasn't exactly those words. But he basically implied that I think we'll be keeping Jordan Meredith at center at this point. I would be shocked if Jackson Powers-Johnson doesn't start, right? Again, if he doesn't start, to me, that'd be crazy. But we have a couple other updates that I want to kind of just get into. There are updates that came out after this last game, right? We've had updates at the linebacker position. We've had updates at the corner position, the wide receiver position. There's certain groups that are kind of just locking themselves in. The wide receiver group, for example, Dante Thornton is starting for the Raiders at this point. There's no more battle. There's no, hey, Jack Bech might actually end up, starting. That's not happening. Jack Bech will only get snaps if Jakobi, Meyers, Trey Tucker, or Dante Thornton come off the field. Maybe they ran too many snaps, and truth be told, it'll probably be either Trey Tucker or Jakobi Meyers that come off, and then Jack Bech will kind of switch in. Because even Dante Thornton, I don't think is going to play as many snaps as Tucker and Meyers. I think Tucker and Meyers are your 2 starting wide receivers. So if you get into 12 personnel, where both Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer are on the football field together, it'll be Jakobi Meyers and Trey Tucker. And I think Thornton would be the 3rd wide receiver that kind of comes in. And Jack Bech at this point is the 4th wide receiver. And I don't even know if he's really the 4th wide receiver. I think there's a couple other guys that you might have to consider ahead of Jack Bech. But regardless of that, I think for the Raiders, the wide receiver position's pretty much locked in. The cornerback position's kind of interesting. And I want to spend some time talking a little bit about this. So as we came into this offseason, Eric Stokes, Darian Porter, that was your 2 starting corners, right? We were like 100% certain these will be the 2 guys. And we've had multiple people battle with Darian Porter at the corner position. We've had DeCameron Richardson battle with him. Before that, right, before the recent battle started, Jacorin Bennett battled for that position. Sam Webb had some first-team snaps. And all these guys only rotated in with Darian Porter for the most part. Recently, we've had DeCameron Richardson. We've had Kyu Blu Kelly, which was kind of surprising to some people that this guy started to rotate in with the first-team unit. Outside of Darian, DeCameron, and Kyu Blu Kelly, we also ended up having JT Woods, who the Raiders signed just a couple weeks back. So those are the 4 corners about 2 weeks ago, right? Right as they kind of made that Jacorin Bennett trade. Those are the 4 corners that were fighting for that position, right? The Darian Porter position specifically. Because Eric Stokes has been locked in as a starter, and Eric Stokes won't come off the field at this point. That's your starting left cornerback right there, right? The guy that's going to, I'm confident Eric Stokes will mostly play on the left side. I don't think they're going to be rotating corners and having corners follow wide receivers. I just don't think we're going to be doing a whole lot of that. The Raiders have the right cornerback position that's kind of up there. Even when you put the tape on, multiple guys have come in and they played kind of that right cornerback position. JT Woods, Cameron Richardson, Darian Porter's played that position. Kyu Blu Kelly has also played that right cornerback position. And now we're hearing that Kyu Blu Kelly is kind of taking the lead a little bit over Darian Porter. At least in today's practice, the report was that although both Darian Porter and Kyu Blu Kelly took all of the first team snaps and they rotated with one another, Kyu Blu Kelly only worked in with the first team unit. Which to me tells me that this time might actually be your starting cornerback. Apparently, Darian Porter was taking snaps with the second team unit. And this is according to the guy that I speak to. From what he saw, Kyu Blu Kelly only took first team snaps. And Darian Porter rotated in with Kyu Blu Kelly. But Porter also worked with the second team unit. And he's saying that at this point, it looks like JT Woods, who also worked with the second team unit, is ahead of Cameron Richardson, who mostly worked with the third string unit, which to me, it kind of tells me that this cornerback position is kind of shaping up. The battle, right? Kyu Blu Kelly might actually be the Raiders starting corner. Now, I still think it'll be between Kyu Blu and Darren Porter. And truth be told, I think both guys will play a lot at some point. Kyu Blu will give up a touchdown at some point, and then Darren Porter might come in. Vice versa. If Porter ends up winning the job and starting, he'll give up a touchdown, or he'll have, some sort of rookie mistake, and then Kyu Blu will end up coming in as well. Remember, Pete Carroll brought this guy in a long time ago. Not a long time, but like 2 years ago. He brought this guy into the Seahawks because he really, really liked the fit. And obviously, he ended up getting released. The Seahawks needed the roster spot, but Pete Carroll wanted this guy at that point, and he brought him into the Raiders as well. And, never overlook the fact that sometimes you can't, although you put this rookie cornerback in and you want this guy to start, you just can't roll with the guy if he doesn't 100% know, every single rule and every single concept within the NFL structure. When you're playing cover 3, for example, you're not just free balling it as a cornerback. There's 100 different rules you have to know. If there's 3 wide receivers on your side and you're a boundary corner, you're playing in a cover 3, you have to recognize that, hey, on the number 2, a wide receiver, not the furthest guy, if he hits a post route, I take that. Or, if the number 1 guy hits a post route, I take that. And at some point, I let it go, right? Maybe at some depth. If they motion a guy out of that 3, having trips, motion a wide receiver to the other side. Now it's a 2-by-2 situation. The rules flip, right? There's so many different things as a starting cornerback, as a starting defensive back, and just as a linebacker, right? Cover 3 is not as simple as cover 3. You just cover that one area. There are rules to a cover 3. And it's important to recognize this because sometimes as a rookie player comes in the NFL, all these different rules, all these motions, and all this stuff that's happening is just too fast. And again, part of that is the rules, right? What do you do on cover 6? What do you do on cover 3 or cover 4? There's just a lot of different things that kind of, make it hard for rookies. And we saw this happen with Jakorian Bennett. When Jakorian Bennett came out of college, if you guys remember that very first preseason training camp, Jakorian Bennett was making plays. He was starting for the Raiders at some point. But when week 1 came around, he ended up not starting. They ended up rolling with Amik Robertson because Jakorian just wasn't 100% ready. And at some point, Jakorian ended up taking that job over from Amik because Amik was struggling. And, although he was able to play the rest of the season, he didn't start right away because, again, it was just a little bit too fast for him, right? That was what Patrick Graham was telling us. It's just a little bit too quick. The speed has to kind of slow down for Jakorian to be able to take more snaps. So if Darren Porter does not start, I don't think it means he won't play, right? I think what it means is that over the next couple of weeks, right? Week 1, 2, 3, 4, at some point, if one of the corners struggles, they might ultimately make this switch. So we'll see what ends up happening. There was also another report from Levi Edwards. He said that Kyu Blu just had a really good rep on Dante Thornton in one-on-ones, put himself in place to punch out a perfectly placed throw by Geno Smith for a pass breakup. One of the things with these one-on-one drills is they're so favored towards the wide receiver. And for a corner to make plays on a one-on-one is impressive, right? Because you are at such a disadvantage. One-on-ones, wide receiver versus cornerback, the corner's at such a disadvantage because you're running backwards. It's the same thing if you're looking at offensive line versus defensive line one-on-ones, right? Like a right guard going up against a D tackle. The offensive linemen are at a huge disadvantage, right? You're going backwards and it's a one-on-one. You kind of know the situation, right? It's a pass rush drill. So really, really impressive that Kyu Blu is out there kind of making these plays. I want to see what this guy can do out there. And, I think from a tape perspective, he was pretty solid out there, right? You can see the length. You can see this guy kind of reacting. He did give up some catches, but, a lot of this also is if one guy's only playing 12 to 15 snaps, you don't really get a feel for, a real game, right? Because if a guy beats you on a curl route and you're in cover 3, he's not going to do that 12 plays later when they try coming back to that same route. Right, you kind of get you kind of get the feel for it. So we'll see what ends up happening. And I want to wrap this video up. There's a lot of people talking about Jakobi Meyers, and people are saying that Jakobi Meyers may actually end up getting traded. I believe it was Hondo Carpenter that might have kind of thrown it out there that the Raiders have some struggles, and the wide receiving room is obviously, it's at the point where it's an asset for the Raiders, right? We have so many good wide receivers that there's a chance that Jakobi Meyers ends up getting traded. Not only is it that Jakobi Meyers might get traded? But like Jakobi actually had a presser a couple days back, and the way he kind of answered the question about his contract and the extension, and the way he kind of talked about it. Not saying that Jakobi was like being negative necessarily, because he definitely was not, but you can just definitely tell that he wants to get the contract taken care of. He wants to be with the Las Vegas Raiders. But I also think Jakobi Meyers is not stupid. I think he also recognizes that the Raiders kind of drafted your replacement almost, right? In Bech. Bech is a very similar wide receiver to Jakobi Meyers. The difference between, I think, Bech and Jakobi is I think Bech is faster than Jakobi. I think he's maybe a little bit longer as well. And, I think Bech can do a better job running downfield routes. But I also think Jakobi Meyers is much better today. So I think for the Raiders, they look at this situation that, hey, if Bech can show us any sort of development, we don't have to pay a guy like Jakobi Meyers. And I know Raider fans are going to say, pay this guy, right? Keep him on this roster. But Jakobi Meyers, what is he going to sign for at this point with the Raiders? Last time he signed with the Raiders, he got paid $11 million a year. And that was a absolute deal for the Raiders, right? Given the production that Jakobi has had. At this point, like, what's he going to get? Is he going to get $20 million a year? Is he going to get $22 million, $25 million? Like, where's the market for Jakobi Meyers at this point? Because I'm sure there's some team out there. Maybe it's a team that's, kind of tanking. Maybe don't have a lot of weapons. I'm sure there's a team out there that'll pay Jakobi that type of money. But the Raiders have a lot of money invested in a lot of different players. And we have a lot of players that are also going to come up for contract extensions. Right? Guys like Elandon Roberts, Jermaine Pratt, Jamal Adams. These guys are all like on 1 year short-term type of contracts. Eric Stokes, short-term contract. Even Isaiah Paul-Matt, I think his contract was 2 years. So there's a lot of guys that for the Raiders, we kind of saw the Raiders go through this past season with Nate Hobbs. We saw them go through it with Trayvon Merrick. That money that those two guys ended up getting, the Raiders signed like 12 guys with just that money. And again, if Jakobi Meyers wants like $20 million a year, what do you do if you're the Las Vegas Raiders and he wants $20 million? And even if it's not 20, if it's like $16 million per year for 3 years, is that too much money for the Raiders to invest in Jakobi? Right? And I just think it's one of those things where the Raiders, they've thought this through at this point. Right? They may not have went all in on a starting caliber right tackle. Instead, they say, let's get that running back first, right? Let's use that 6th overall pick on a running back as opposed to a starting caliber, franchise caliber, I should say, right tackle. They thought about it. Hey, Jakobi Meyers in his final year. Let's get a wide receiver that's kind of similar to Jakobi Meyers. Trey Tucker, we don't really know if he's going to be the future for this team. Let's get a guy that's similar to Trey Tucker. Right? I feel like the Raiders are thinking long-term with some of the draft picks and some of the guys that they're kind of bringing in. And I think for the Raiders, it's one of those things where Jakobi is a good wide receiver and he might go for 7, 8, 9,000, 1,200 yards this season. But do you have the cap for Jakobi Meyers? And again, I just think it's one of those things where the Raiders are going to have to figure this out because Jakobi is a good football player, but he may be too expensive. And, if Bech does show any sort of flashes, and more than that, if Dante Thornton is a true number 1 wide receiver, right? Like, let's say Thornton is, people are going to start saying this guy's a top 15 wide receiver by like week 12, right? Let's just say he starts making a ton of plays. He ends up being a top 15 wide receiver. At that point, do you still bring back Jakobi Meyers, or do you say we have Dante Thornton, we have Brock Bowers, we have Ashton Jeanty? Do you just roll forward and say we have these 3 guys that are like difference makers, and let's save that $16, $17 million and let's go out there and maybe invest in a guard? Or it's just one of those things where the Raiders are going to have to kind of figure it out. If it's up to me, I would definitely bring Jakobi Meyers back, but the money aspect has to be right. We are already incurring almost $7 million in cap hits. Dead cap specifically for Jakobi Meyers. So next year and the year after, we already have $7 million in dead cap. So if you sign him and you bring him back, it'll be $7 million on top of what you're going to pay him. And the $7 million doesn't go anywhere. We're going to have those hits anyways. But it's nice to have some rookie wide receivers, right? Bech, Dante Thornton, to have some dead cap at the wide receiver position. You can kind of incur it as well, and it doesn't really crush you in terms of salary cap. So we'll see what ends up happening, man. Let me know what you guys think. There's obviously a ton of updates coming out from the Las Vegas Raiders, battles and those type of things. A lot of tape kind of coming out. Let me know if there's a player you guys want me to break down. A lot of people have mentioned get into Lockie Tossie a little bit and break his tape down. And I do plan to do Tossie, but I will wait, I think, until the final third preseason game's over. You know, Tossi's locked into the Las Vegas Raiders this season. He's not going anywhere. And having 3 games, I think, is going to be a lot better than just the 2, because I think in his 3rd game, he's going to be the best player, you know, that he's ever been in his career, right? So the 3rd game he's essentially going to go into, he's going to be a lot more comfortable, a lot more confident. So we'll definitely get into Locky Tossi, but if there's other players you guys want to see, drop a comment down in the comments below, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.